Have you ever seen the Shadow Man? I have. A few times. Let me tell you about the first. My first experience with the Shadow Man was when I was about 8 years old. My younger brother Andy and I always slept in the same bedroom. We had done this for years. We lived in an old 18th century home. Very old, with lots of history. I have many stories to tell of this house. Our little room was small. One window, a set of red bunk beds, and a closet with shuttered doors in the far corner. I got the top bunk because I was the oldest. Now I kinda wish I'd chose the bottom bunk. Now here's a little secret about me. I've always been afraid of the dark. It's always creeped me out. A legitimate self-diagnosed nyctophobia that only recently I've been able to overcome. Even the thought of going into a dark room gave me goosebumps on every inch of my body. Like I knew there was something lingering there. In the dark. Something I couldn't see. I had a lot of fears growing up. But my biggest was the dark. This knowingness of the unknown. I'd lie there every night, facing that closet. On the wall beside it, a poster from Wrestlemania 1 with Hulk Hogan and Mr. T. I loved that poster, and I would stare at it as I fell asleep. It felt like a tag team duality. Hulk Hogan was the light, Mr. T was the dark. Up against old Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. I always felt like Mr. T had something to say. And well, because he always did. Until one night, he actually did. The night wasn't any different than any other night. The moon streamed in the window, highlighting every edge and corner in the room. Just enough to adjust the eyes. Just enough to see. I'd stare at that poster, waiting for my eyes to tire. Waiting for them to close. As I began to fade off to sleep, my eyes becoming slight, they began to sort of shudder, like they were flipping on and off really quickly. A sort of buzzing sensation. I quickly blinked a few times to help reset my focus. And as my eyes came back into focus, I noticed Mr. T's left hand had come off the rope. And his right hand, that was pointing the finger, was moving in and out with a sort of pointing action, as if to point something out to me. Pointing right at me as to give me shit or advice or maybe a warning. I could see his lips were moving, as if he was trying to say something. I could see the actions of his mouth, the pronunciations, the P's, B's, and T's, but couldn't hear a thing. Hulkster stood there in his regular smiling gaze, his right arm gesturing towards Mr. T like he was the one with the answers. He was the one with something to say. Talk to this guy. Mr. T just kept on gesturing to me, speaking, as if something or someone was trying to come through that picture to tell me something. For me, for an 8-year-old boy who was scared of the dark, I thought Mr. T was going to get me. My heart was racing with fear. My skin freezing. I was petrified. What was I seeing? This picture, a photograph, had come to life before my eyes and began to dictate something to me. I couldn't hear him, but he was speaking. His mouth was moving, his arm moving. But this wasn't real, was it? What was I seeing? I quickly closed my eyes and brought the covers over my head. Wrapped over one side, face still exposed so I could keep watch if I needed to. My body was fully armored. My blankets had me covered. So I lied there, terrified at the thought of Mr. T coming out of that wall to get me. My eyes froze closed. I couldn't peek. I felt cold. I was trembling, as if I was dropped into a bath of icy cold water. I was cold and, strangely, sort of floaty. I could feel my body begin to contract and vibrate as I slowly lost control of it. It was almost as if my body wasn't there, like it had faded away, like it didn't exist. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. Paralyzed in absolute fear. In my mind, I had to try to fight this. But how? I was way too scared. My heart was racing. My mind was buzzing. I couldn't move and had no intention of opening my eyes. I couldn't. I had no control. It was as though my mind alone was in a dark room with no walls. Nothing to see or hear. And just the feeling of fear and not being able to escape. Yet, somehow, I felt that hold on me being slightly released. And it was at this moment where my eyes finally began to open. And it was almost like I was allowed to see. Whatever fear or presence that was contracting my body, I feel like it let me open my eyes. And for a reason. There, in front of the door, stood a tall, shadowy figure. Right in the corner, and right in my line of sight. Standing in front of my Wrestlemania poster, and just outside of that closet. Like I was meant to see it. Like it let me see it. It was tall, the full 8-foot height of the room. Black in color, but not a black like you imagine. This was a deep black, like the purest of blacks. Black hole black, the kind where light just doesn't exist. It had a slight orange-red glow to its eyes, the shape slightly slanted and thin. It just stared at me. This black, monstrous mass of finely digitized incense smoke. It stared at me, as if it was trying to siphon my soul from my body. It wanted me. For an 8-year-old, I thought this thing was here to take me. I quickly closed my eyes and tried to scream. The thought and action of screaming existed. I wanted to scream. I tried so hard to scream. I could feel all the buildup of fear inside, and I knew if I could scream, Mom and Dad would hear me. Andy would hear me. But I couldn't. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And all I felt was absolute fear and terror for this thing. This entity in front of me. And why do I feel like this thing wants to hurt me? It took a few moments of sitting in that fear to finally break free. I really struggled with it. It was like I was floating and tied with rope from head to toe like a mummy that had suddenly come loose or unraveled. I could feel the hold of my body being slowly released. I felt relaxed, and the weight on my chest got lighter. Once I noticed I could move a leg or an arm, once I realized it had finally let go of its hold on me, I quickly did this while kicking flip-flop in my bed, which set me completely free. I opened my eyes. The figure was gone. Mr. T back to his original spot. Everything seemed back to normal. I lied there and cried for a few minutes. It took a while to go back to sleep. I tried to brush it off. I tried to shake it, but kept feeling this odd sensation that something was watching me. I was tingling all over, like I had been covered in thousands of tiny ants. I could feel them on my skin. Waves and waves of goosebumps and chills going through me. I didn't understand, and I was still completely terrified, but felt okay, calm, and somewhat at peace. I finally found the courage to get out of my bunk. I grabbed my blanket. I slid down the ladder to wake my little brother Andy in the bunk below. I still remember the look he gave me. That Clayton forehead scowl from his 5-year-old face. He knew, though. He knew I needed to slide into bed with him. So he slid over and let me in, and immediately fell asleep again before I could even grab my blanket. Andy was always a deep sleeper. I envy him for that. And I knew he was a tough guy. I knew he'd make me feel safe. He never minded when I'd curl up into bed with him, and I never really told him why I did it all these years. And he never asked. This wasn't the first time I did it to him, and certainly wouldn't be the last, because I had this fear. I was scared. I had a fear of the dark that I couldn't talk about. I was afraid of a shadow man that I wasn't strong enough to battle or understand. And Andy made me feel like I had a tag team partner. And I think Andy knew this too. Andy loves the ultimate warrior. On this day, and still today, he became my Hulk Hogan. Time to tag me in, Andy. It's my turn to kick some dark ass. Hey everyone. I'm dedicating this first short story to my brother Andy, the toughest dude I know. Thanks for sticking around to listen to it. I've seen the Shadow Man a few times in my life. All very memorable moments, and stories that I'd love to share with you someday. All equally creepy. So, have you ever seen the Shadow Man? Let me know in the junk drawer below. I'd love to hear your stories too. Happy today, everyone. Stay creepy.